You're fired, Sarah. Clean out your desk by noon. Madison Reeves' voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. Behind her stood two security guards, faces impassive, and Linda from HR clutching her tablet like a shield. I stared at Madison's perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on my laptop, with my algorithm displayed on the screen, except my name had been meticulously scrubbed from every line of documentation. For 4 years, I'd been Quantum Tech's lead algorithm developer, the quiet one who arrived first and left last, who skipped holidays to solve impossible problems. I'd created a market prediction system worth billions, and now the CEO's niece was stealing it with a smile. May I ask why I'm being terminated? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Madison's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. Performance issues primarily, and some concerns about your commitment to company values. She gestured vaguely toward my algorithm on the screen. The innovation team needs to move in a new direction. Translation: I'd built something too valuable, and the CEO's niece wanted the credit. The severance package is generous, Linda mumbled, sliding papers across the polished conference table. 4 weeks' pay, health coverage through the end of the month. We'll need you to sign these IP transfer agreements before you leave. Linda, who'd approved my last performance review with exceptional contributor checked in every category, now couldn't meet my eyes. I glanced at the documents, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. 4 years of work, 4 years of 80-hour weeks, missed holidays and declining social invitations. 4 years of building an algorithm that could predict market fluctuations with 87% accuracy, unprecedented in fintech and now valued at approximately $4.2 billion by industry analysts. At 29, Madison had been with the company exactly 3 months and 4 days. I'd been counting. 3 months since CEO Richard Reeves had introduced his niece as our new innovation director, a position created specifically for her despite her bachelor's degree in communications and 0 technical experience. I nodded slowly, gathering my personal items, a framed photo of my sister's family, a ceramic mug from my last birthday, a small plant that had somehow survived 4 years of sporadic attention. The security guards flanked me as I walked to my desk, their presence ensuring everyone in the open office noticed my disgrace. Wei, my closest colleague, shot me a look of horrified sympathy from across the room. I gave him the slightest headshake. Don't get involved. He had a family, a mortgage, responsibilities. Now I had nothing but a half-dead plant and a box of office trinkets. As I packed, I could see Madison through the glass walls of the conference room, already presenting my work to the senior leadership team. Through the soundproofing, I couldn't hear her words, but her animated gestures told the story. She was taking credit for the breakthrough, probably explaining how she'd conceptualized the core algorithm and directed its implementation. The security guard cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we need to escort you to the exit now." I nodded, taking one last look at my desk, at the hidden sticky note under my keyboard with my personal cloud backup passwords, at the system I'd built that nobody else fully understood, at the terminal where I'd implemented my standard 30-day authentication protocol, a security measure so routine nobody had questioned it, not even my team. As the elevator descended, Linda finally spoke. "For what it's worth, Sarah, this wasn't my decision." I met her eyes for the first time. "It never is it?" The lobby's revolving door spat me out onto Madison Avenue at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. 4 years at Quantum Tech ended in less than 45 minutes. I stood there, clutching my sad little box of belongings, as suited professionals streamed around me like I was a rock in a river. My phone buzzed with a text from Wei. "This is wrong. M claiming complete ownership of algorithm. Says she refined your primitive prototype. Meeting with investors scheduled in 2 weeks." I took a deep breath of crisp autumn air and hailed a taxi. They thought I was replaceable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, my apartment felt smaller than usual. I'd never noticed how the walls of my one-bedroom in Brooklyn seemed to lean inward, how the ceiling hung too low. 4 years of 60-hour weeks meant I'd rarely spent waking hours here. Now, it felt like a cage. I opened my laptop and stared at the blinking cursor. 6 job applications sent, 0 responses. My phone showed 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably recruiters who'd suddenly lost interest when they checked with QuantumTech's HR department. Madison had been busy. The bottle of wine I'd been saving for my algorithm's official launch sat on my counter. I opened it and poured a glass, then opened my personal cloud storage. There they were, every iteration of my algorithm, every line of code, every test result, all meticulously documented with timestamps and my digital signature. Not stolen company property, just my own development logs, the kind any serious developer keeps. My phone buzzed with a text from Wei. They can't make it work. M screaming at dev team, says documentation incomplete. I smiled for the first time that day. Of course the documentation was incomplete. I'd written it that way deliberately. Clear enough for my team to implement, but missing the critical architecture that lived only in my head. Standard practice in an industry where job security was a myth. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was the authentication protocol, a security measure I'd implemented that required my personal verification every 30 days. Without it, the system would gradually degrade to 50% accuracy. Not enough to crash completely, just enough to make investors question its value. I took another sip of wine and pulled up LinkedIn. Madison had already updated her profile. Creator and director of QuantumTech's revolutionary market prediction algorithm. Her profile picture showed her in a power suit, arms crossed, standing in front of our office's Manhattan skyline view. My view, for 4 years. I scrolled through my contacts, wondering who might still take my call. Most of my college friends had drifted away during my QuantumTech years. My sister lived in Seattle with her husband and kids. My parents in Florida, retired and blissfully unaware of tech industry politics. My phone buzzed again. Wei. Investor meeting in 2 weeks. M promising 90% accuracy. System currently at 82% and dropping. I did the math. In 2 weeks, the system would be at approximately 65% accuracy, noticeably worse than when I'd left. In 3 more weeks, it would hit 50% and plateau there. Not useless, but not worth $4.2 billion either. I typed back, "Don't get involved, Wei. Not your problem." His response came immediately. "They're making it my problem. I'm failing to properly implement Madison's vision." I closed my eyes. Madison was setting Wei up as the fall guy. Classic corporate maneuver. Find someone to blame when things go wrong. I'd seen it happen to others, never thinking it would happen to me. Now Wei was next. My laptop pinged with an email notification, a rejection from the 3rd company I'd applied to. "While your qualifications are impressive, we've decided to pursue candidates whose experience better aligns with our current needs." Translation: Madison or her uncle had called them. I opened my resume and stared at it. Senior Algorithm Developer at QuantumTech, 2021 to 2025. Before that, Junior Developer at a startup that had folded. Before that, MIT Computer Science. A career that had seemed so promising this morning now looked like a dead end. For the first time, I felt the full weight of what had happened. I wasn't just out of a job. I was being erased, my work stolen, my reputation smeared, my future in the industry potentially destroyed. All because I'd built something valuable, and Madison Reeves wanted the credit. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. Crying wouldn't solve this. Neither would rage, though I felt plenty of that too. I opened a new document and began to type. Not a job application this time, but a plan. If Madison wanted my algorithm, she could have it, but only on my terms. I had 30 days before the system degraded completely, 30 days to turn this around. My phone buzzed one more time. Wei again. CEO asking questions about authentication protocol. Nobody knows what he's talking about. I smiled and typed back, "Tell them to check section 5.3 of the documentation. It's all there." It wasn't, of course. Section 5.3 was intentionally vague, mentioning a periodic system verification without specifics. By the time they figured it out, the investor meeting would be a disaster. The stock would plummet, and Madison's triumph would turn to ashes in her mouth. I took another sip of wine and felt something unfamiliar. Power. For the first time since I'd walked into that conference room, I was in control again. They thought I was replaceable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Day 12 after my firing, the first call came. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. I let it go to voicemail. "Sarah, this is Linda from HR at Quantum Tech. There seems to be an issue with some documentation. If you could call me back to clarify a few points, we'd appreciate it. This would be a paid consultation, of course." I deleted the message and went back to my job search. 2 more rejections had arrived overnight. One interviewer had been brutally honest. "We heard you tried to claim ownership of company IP at Quantum Tech. We can't risk that here." My phone buzzed with a text from Wei. "System accuracy down to 71%. M blaming IT department. 3 people fired yesterday." I felt a twinge of guilt. Those IT workers hadn't done anything wrong, but neither had I, and that hadn't protected me. Day 14 brought another call, this time from Quantum Tech's CTO, James Parker. I'd always respected James. He'd been the one to approve my original algorithm proposal when everyone else thought it was too ambitious. "Sarah, it's James. Look, I know things ended awkwardly, but we need your help with the authentication protocol. The team can't locate the verification sequence. We'll pay consultant rates, triple your old salary." I texted back rather than calling. "Sorry, I signed an NDA as part of my severance. Can't discuss company projects." A lie, but they'd need to check with legal to confirm, which would buy more time. James: "Madison says you're being difficult. This affects a lot of people's jobs, Sarah." I didn't respond. Instead, I checked Quantum Tech's stock price, down 3% since my departure. Not dramatic yet, but a concerning trend for a company that had seen nothing but growth for years. Day 18, Wei sent a photo of the office, empty desks where the IT team had been. Madison visible through the conference room glass, gesturing angrily at a group of developers. "System at 67%. Investor meeting in 6 days. M promising heads will roll if not fixed." I closed my eyes, remembering the day I'd implemented the authentication protocol. It had been a standard security measure, the kind any responsible developer would include. A simple 16-digit key that needed to be entered every 30 days, resetting the system's accuracy parameters. I'd documented it in the company's security logs, but who reads those? The protocol itself was buried in thousands of lines of code, labeled innocuously as System Integrity Verification. Day 21. My phone rang at 2 a.m. Madison herself. "Listen." Her voice slurred slightly. She'd been drinking. "I know what you did. The system's failing, and you're the only one who can fix it." "I don't know what you're talking about, Madison. I was fired for performance issues, remember?" "Cut the crap. The investors are coming in 3 days. Fix the system and I'll make sure you get a good reference." I laughed. "A reference? You stole my work, fired me, and blacklisted me across the industry. What makes you think I'd help you now?" Silence, then, "Name your price." "It's not about money." "Then what do you want? Your job back? Fine, you can have it." "Not enough." I could hear her breathing, calculating. "What then?" "Full credit for the algorithm, a public acknowledgement from the company, my job back as Chief Technology Officer, and your resignation." She laughed, high and brittle. "You're delusional. That will never happen." "Then good luck with your investor meeting. I hear the system's down to 65% accuracy now. Hardly revolutionary." "You'll never work in this industry again," she hissed. "Thanks to you, I already can't. So what exactly do I have to lose?" I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Day 23. The day before the investor meeting, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find CEO Richard Reeves himself standing in my hallway, looking like he'd aged a decade. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said, his voice grave. "The future of quantum tech depends on it." Richard Reeves looked out of place in my small Brooklyn apartment, his bespoke suit a stark contrast to my IKEA furniture. He declined my offer of coffee, getting straight to business. "The system's failing," he said, his voice tight. "The investor meeting is tomorrow. $4.2 billion in funding is on the line." I sat across from him, keeping my expression neutral. "I'm sorry to hear that. Technical issues can be complicated." "Cut the act, Sarah. We both know what's happening." He leaned forward. "Madison told me you built in some kind of kill switch." "Not a kill switch. A standard authentication protocol. It's in the security documentation, which conveniently requires your personal verification." I shrugged. "Industry standard practice. Prevents unauthorized access or modifications." Richard's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I think Madison already told you my terms." He stood abruptly, pacing my small living room. "You can't seriously expect me to make my niece resign. She stole my work, took credit for 4 years of my life, fired me without cause, and blacklisted me across the industry. What did you expect would happen?" "She's family. And I was a loyal employee who made your company billions. Look how that turned out for me." Richard stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I can give you your job back, a promotion, a public acknowledgement of your work, but Madison stays." I shook my head. "Not good enough." "Be reasonable, Sarah. You're asking me to humiliate my brother's daughter." "No, I'm asking for consequences for someone who stole intellectual property and destroyed a career. The humiliation is a bonus." His face hardened. "We'll reverse engineer the protocol. Our team is working around the clock." "You have 16 hours until the investor meeting. The authentication key is 16 digits long. That's approximately 10 quadrillion possible combinations. Good luck." Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face paling. "The system's down to 62% accuracy now." "Right on schedule." He looked at me with new respect and fear. "You planned this from the beginning." "No, I implemented a security protocol, as any responsible developer would. What happened after I was fired was entirely your company's choice." Richard sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. "The board is meeting in an hour. If the investors pull out tomorrow, our stock will crash. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs." A pang of guilt hit me. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want, Sarah? Really?" I took a deep breath. "I want what's mine. My work, my reputation, my future in this industry." Richard nodded slowly. "And Madison?" "She needs to face consequences. Real ones, not a lateral move to another cushy position." He was silent for a long moment, then, "Come to the office tomorrow, 9 a.m. before the investors arrive. Bring the authentication key. We'll work something out." "That's not good enough, Richard. I need specifics." He stood. "Fine. Full credit for the algorithm. Your job back as CTO with double your previous salary and equity. A public statement clearing your name. And Madison," he hesitated, "Madison will no longer be with the company. And my blacklisting? I'll personally call every company you've applied to, explain there was a misunderstanding." I considered his offer. It was everything I'd asked for, but something felt wrong. "How do I know you'll keep your word once I've reset the system?" Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. "Because I've already had legal draw this up. It's all in writing, pending your signature and the successful reset of the system." I took the contract, scanning it carefully. Everything was there, exactly as he'd said. "One more condition," I said. "I present to the investors tomorrow. Me, not Madison." Richard's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Done." The next morning, I walked through Quantum Tech's glass doors at exactly 9 a.m., wearing the suit I'd bought for special occasion. The security guard who'd escorted me out 2 weeks ago did a double-take. "Welcome back, Ms. Chen," he said, handing me a new access badge. "Mr. Reeves is waiting for you in the conference room." The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt surreal. When the doors opened, Wei was waiting, a huge grin on his face. "The prodigal genius returns," he whispered, falling into step beside me. "Madison's been in with HR for the last hour. Lots of shouting." The office was eerily quiet as I walked through, people staring openly. Some nodded respectfully, others looked away, ashamed. I kept my head high, my steps measured. Richard and the board members were waiting in the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Linda from HR escorting a red-faced Madison to her office, where security was already boxing up her things. "Sarah," Richard said, standing as I entered, "the contract is signed. The press release acknowledging your work goes out at noon. The investors arrive at 10. He handed me a tablet. "The system?" Professional, confident, I took the tablet and entered my 16-digit authentication key. The screen flashed green, and the accuracy metrics immediately began climbing back toward 87%. "It will take about an hour to fully stabilize," I said, handing the tablet back. Richard nodded, then turned to the board. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our new Chief Technology Officer, Sarah Chen." 6 months later, I stood at the window of my new corner office on the 43rd floor, watching the sunset paint Manhattan gold. On my desk sat a small plaque the development team had given me, "Not replaceable." Quantum Tech's stock had risen 62% since the investor meeting where I'd presented my algorithm, my name now properly attached to every patent and publication. The system was operating at 94% accuracy after improvements I'd implemented with my expanded team. Madison had disappeared from the industry entirely. Last I heard, she'd moved to Los Angeles to pursue other opportunities, the corporate equivalent of exile. Her LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned Quantum Tech. Wei had been promoted to head of development, leading a team that had doubled in size. The toxic culture that had allowed Madison's theft was being systematically dismantled, with Linda from HR implementing new whistleblower protections and anonymous reporting channels. Richard had become an unexpected ally. The day after my reinstatement, he'd called me into his office and apologized, not with corporate platitudes, but with genuine remorse. "I failed you," he'd said simply. "It won't happen again." Since then, he'd backed every initiative I'd proposed, from flexible work policies to a mentorship program for female developers. The authentication protocol remained in place, not out of spite or fear, but as a reminder that systems need safeguards, that people need protection, that value should be recognized. Every 30 days, I entered the key myself, a ritual that kept me grounded. My sister had visited last weekend, marveling at my new apartment with its view of the Brooklyn Bridge. "You seem different," she'd observed. "Stronger." She was right. I was different. The quiet developer who'd let others take credit, who'd worked holidays without complaint, who'd believed that merit alone would be recognized. She was gone. In her place stood someone who understood her worth, who demanded respect, who knew that sometimes you had to fight for what was yours. As I turned from the window, my phone buzzed with a text from Wei. "Teams waiting in the conference room, new project kickoff." I smiled, gathering my notes. This project was even more ambitious than the last, a system that could not just predict markets, but help stabilize them during crises. It had been my idea, presented to the board with my name prominently displayed on every slide. As I walked through the office, developers nodded respectfully. Some had been there when I was escorted out, others were new hires attracted by our growing reputation. All of them knew my story. It had become part of company lore, a cautionary tale and an inspiration. I paused at the conference room door, watching my team inside, brilliant, diverse, engaged. They weren't just colleagues anymore, they were allies who had my back as I had theirs. This was what winning really looked like. Not just getting my job back or seeing Madison face consequences, but creating something better from the ashes of betrayal. A company where credit was given where due. A culture where quiet brilliance was valued as much as charismatic presentation. A future where the next Sarah Chen wouldn't need an authentication protocol to protect what was hers. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, ready to build something new.